Welcome to Prophy Conference. It is great to see you. Thanks so much for joining into this live stream with me today. We are so excited about our Prophy Conference coming up here in just a few days. And it's going to be an amazing event, March 10th, 11th, and 12th. And a great time to have a conversation really about preventative treatment and what it means to be able to really stay focused and energized on being consistent with your treatment regimen that your doctor has planned for you. So, man, I am excited to invite a dear friend of mine with me today who has a lot to say about this topic and who is a really great resource when it comes to these things. And that is Andy Matthews from Acaria Health. Andy, it's great to see you today. Thanks so much for joining me on this EventCast.
Good to be here. Good to be here.
Yeah, I know a lot of people know who you are, and you've been around the community for a long time. You're like me. You're one of those guys living with hemophilia every day, and but you also work in the industry, and you see people who have really done really well with prophylaxis. You've seen other people have not done as well, and you have an interesting perspective because not only do you live with it, but you've also seen a lot of people go through things. And I was really excited to be able to have this conversation today to talk a little bit about maybe some of the tips and tricks, but maybe before we get started, I'd love to know a little bit more about you, where you live, where you're from, and also how you're impacted, and maybe talk a little bit about how you even got started on prophylaxis.
Love to. Yeah, Andy Matthews turned 56 back in February. So I'm honestly very blessed to even be alive. Not many guys my age are even alive today. So I'm not only alive, I have pretty darn good joints other than an ankle that was because I couldn't be on prophylaxis because back in my day they didn't do that. Right now, well, I live in Waco, Texas. I always lived in Texas. We moved from the Metroplex a few years ago. Um, and I'm very active, live a very active lifestyle. I try to exercise routinely, but just I have a ranch and I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I have to do prophylaxis. I mean, it's not a choice of just convenience. I have to. Otherwise, I couldn't do what I do, and I couldn't do what I do if I have even worse joints, constantly bleeding. If you want me to tell you how I started, it's very interesting. I still remember this. When I was about 27, I used to work out a lot, and but it was crazy stupid, really, because I would constantly try to push it to the exact limit and bottom of the limit to where I would bleed, and try to get to if I did such and such weight and I knew I could go this far, well, I would try to keep it right under where I thought I would have a bleed. But then it's like Russian roulette. You never That's just that you can try to do that, but most of the time that'll fail you. And I think I was at a summer camp in Utah, and there was a great doctor named Blair Bybee that was actually kind of just a neat doctor. He hung around at camp all week, and he was with us, and so I got to know him, and that would have been in mid probably 93ish, something like that. And prophylaxis was starting to, they were starting to talk about it, and I just asked him, I mean, how do I do prophylaxis? It's sounds routine today, but back then it wasn't. And he told me you needed get your clotting factor up to around 40%. Therefore, you can last a couple of days. And so then, you need to get your doctor back in Dallas to write you a script every other day. And so I did. He didn't have a problem with it. Nobody really bucked it. They did it. And man, then I could start. It just changed my life. I could start working out. And not worry about bleeding. I could ride my bike. I used to do a lot of mountain biking, which was could be very dangerous. Not worry about it. It really changed my life, and I just wish. But I mean, I was born in the wrong era. They just couldn't do the reason they couldn't do prophylaxis when I was a kid is I was on cryoprecipitate, which is basically like plasma. It's like a big ordeal to get an infusion. You have to keep it at home, and it's frozen. It takes 30, 45 minutes to just give one infusion, where today, if you feel like a bleed, you run home or run in your car, wherever you're giving it. It could be on a tree stump out in the wild, whatever. You do it in under 3 minutes, but it wasn't back that. So it wasn't like that in the old days. So yeah, I really wouldn't probably have any bad joints had I done prophylaxis years ago.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about how prophylaxis is one of those things that's very commonly recommended today. We pretty much
Mm-hmm.
think about that as just a natural part of treatment. But man, I remember same thing for me as a kid when I mean I was adult and married I think before I was actually even contemplating really embracing prophylaxis. So it was a big mind shift for a lot of folks, wasn't it, when they went from like having to just kind of do on demand. It was like you just treat like right
Oh
around the
yeah.
bleed. You're really treating yourself to make certain that you don't die, basically. But really, to go from that mindset to no, we can do this to prevent bleeds. That was a big shift, and I still see people today. I mean, it's pretty rare, but I do see people today that seems like that they even still have a hard time making that shift of thinking, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think back, there's some constants in life, right? Like if you overeat, you never exercise, any of this stuff, you're probably going to get heart disease and probably have a heart attack. Maybe not always, but probably, and die of an early age. That's medical community would 100% agree with that. Same thing with prophylaxis. If you don't do prophylaxis, whether you like it or not, I really don't care, but you will suffer the consequences with your joints. And the problem with your joints is you can't go back. Yes, they have total knee replacements and they do those routinely, maybe even maybe an ankle replacement, or elbow is, the last resort replacement. You can do that, but why do you want to do that? Because the man-made joints do not last like the God-given joints that we have. So I just implore you. And I knew a guy in Austin, Texas, didn't really believe in prophylaxis. He was a younger, like when I was 13, he was probably 10 years old. He was 3 or 4 years younger than me. And I remember, this was probably 10 or 15 years ago, he still didn't do prophylaxis. He passed away in a hospital in Austin. And I probably could have been prophylaxis because he had a stomach bleed. He had no factor in him. By the time the hospital, small hospital, they didn't have factor on hand. By the time his wife went to get it, they opened him up. It was just a horrible, horrible issue. But he could have been living had he done prophylaxis. But I can tell you many stories with guys that would not have the joints they have today because of an injury they had that maybe would have been a minor injury had they had prophylaxis. So just it's not, there's no kidding around. You drive in a car every day. Okay. How often do you see car wrecks? All the time, right? Well, the reason you're not in one is just that, you're lucky. At some point you probably will be. And so you might not die, but you could have you're really messed up elbow or knee because of an injury that maybe you could have prevented.
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I think we're finding now with where research is and tracking all of this stuff that just even one major bleed can really
Yeah.
start a cycle of bleeding that
Yes.
is just really unfortunate and unnecessary. And so that onboard correction is so needed and necessary, and especially in places like the U.S., Canada, UK, where there is regular access to
Yeah.
medication. It just doesn't make sense to not do it. But I guess this brings up another issue because sometimes it's not just about access. Sometimes it's just about the human element. I mean, I know, you and I've had conversations about this before in the past. We're just talking about, man, I just get tired of sticking myself with a needle. Like, I don't care if it's once a day or if it's once a month. I still get like, kind of like, do I have to do this to that? I mean, I like to think of myself a pretty positive guy, but I mean, I get taxed. I get tired just like anybody else does. And I guess the question would be, like, what is kind of your number one tip for staying motivated when that road is a long road? You got to do this really your whole life. I mean, how do you stay energized and motivated to stay on your treatment regimen?
Well, you just have to be committed to it. I mean, I get sick of taking my truck because I drive so much to the car dealership to get the oil change. I really do, because it takes time out of my day. I got to wait, but I have to do it. Okay. If I don't, what happens? Same with prophylaxis. You just have to be committed. Now, I will say, without mentioning any products or anything, talk to your doctor. There are different products, all types of products, extended half-life, just different things. If you're having venous access problems, I have good veins, so prophylaxis is easier for me. But if you're having a horrible time because you're saying, I can't access, talk to your doctor. There's other options. There's just lots of different therapies out there now that pretty much anybody can do some sort of prophylaxis. Let me just put it that way. And I think you would agree with that, Jonathan. There's lots of products out there. Not every product's for everybody, but there's usually some regimen that almost anybody can do some type of prophylactic regimen. Does that make sense?
And I think it's so necessary. I think that there's also seasons in life where you have to sort of modify and pivot,
Mm-hmm.
and some of that might be a different product. Some of that might be just a different workflow for you. I know
Mm-hmm.
that there's been busier times in my life where I had to do it in the car. I think there's a pretty funny story of you trying to do it at a stoplight one time. There's different.
Many times.
You kind of just forget, grab it while you're running out the door, and you do it on the fly. But this is a good trick, for those of you who are training your kids how to stick themselves and to self-infuse. I mean, that's not going away. Like, this is a great time to encourage them just to get in the rhythms and routines of it, to keep it part of, brush your teeth, take your factor, whatever that is. And on whatever day that is, sometimes it makes a big difference. But, even with seasons of life change, I think it's important to, like you said, you got to be committed, but you got to also remind yourself why you're committed. Now, I think the one thing that is true about all of us is that if you don't take it, at some point, your body will remind you that you still have hemophilia. And what you don't want to happen is you don't want your body to be reminding you very often, because that usually means that you've got inflammation, you've got maybe microbleeding happening, you've got some other things. But obviously, we're all trying to avoid the really severe crisis that you mentioned earlier, that emergency where you might end up in a car accident or something like that. That's the big things, but the little things are important too. I mean, you have a number of microbleeds, going for a period of time. I mean, you very well could end up with joint damage that could be avoidable, but the only way it's avoidable is by preventative therapy, right?
Yeah, and let me just talk to you about money. Does everybody like money? Sure, everybody likes money. Why? Because you need money to live. Everybody wants more money, right? Well, I'll put it to you this way. If you're a young man and you commit yourself to prophylaxis, I will promise you will have a better career and make more money. Why? Because you'll be able to stay at your job better. You won't be out with a bleed. If you want, that's why I'm saying it is not an option, because I know two twins that are probably in their mid-20s today. Both have great careers. Their mother was very committed to prophylaxis, and they have beautiful joints today, and they're still good about it. I know, others, many that for whatever reason, and these guys are, 28 to 31. I'm 56. Okay. Jonathan, you're not far behind me. And, we didn't do prophylaxis because we couldn't, but there's so many young men that are in the late 20s to early 30s have horrible joints. They didn't do prophylaxis for whatever reason. There's lots of different reasons, but either an inhibitor or not doing prophylaxis is pretty much a guarantee of bad joints. So we just me and Jonathan both feel just incredibly passionate about this. I mean, just over the top, because we've seen it. You see as many or more guys that have great stories and have train wreck stories. And we just want to, through this podcast, help you realize don't fall into that, because it's easy to fall into. Like you said, you can get out of the sync, get out of habit. It's a pain in the neck. If it's a pain in the neck, find a time. I do it in the morning because I'm always in my office in the morning, and that kind of thing. Or just put a sticky note. I love sticky notes. Put a sticky note somewhere and say, hey, it's hard to remember every other day or 3 times a week. You kind of, everything meshes together and life happens, and you're like, oh crud. Keep a dose in your car. Most of the factor today, people don't know that, or is really room temperature. And even if it's not completely room temperature, keeping one dose in your car is not going to kill you. So have one with you. Don't say you got to go home. So if you're at work, that'd be a perfect example. Your boss doesn't really want to hear that you have hemophilia unless they work in the business. They might understand it, but most the bosses, they don't. You don't want hemophilia to be a big issue in your work life because it creates problems. So I'll just leave it at that. Is that?
Yeah. No, that's so good. That's so good. I know you're real big on positive reinforcement and getting your mind right. Is there any tips that you give people, like when you start to kind of get down? Because look, I mean, even for positive people, sometimes it's easy to start to go down a rabbit hole in your own mind of like, man, this sucks. Like, I just don't want to live like this. Why do I have to live like this? How do you refresh your mind to say, oh, I got to keep going. I got to keep going. How do you do that, Andy?
Well, it's funny. This is a little off topic, but I just had a lunch with a guy after church yesterday, and he was a young man starting in a photography business. And I told him, I said, you know how you really do extraordinary things? You got to get in the blue room, meaning you got to get in a zone that the general population's not in. I've always looked at my hemophilia. I have hemophilia. Yeah, I would love to not have hemophilia. Sure, everybody would. But I have it. I really think it makes me have this incredibly strong mind that it was just a God-given thing that nobody else, a lot of people don't have. Why can most people do extraordinary things and some people can't? It's all in their mind. And so I would just tell you, you were given a gift of hemophilia. Think of it that way because you have it, and let it turn into a beautiful thing. Unleash your mind. And one of those things in your mind is you got to do prophylaxis, because if you don't do prophylaxis, you probably are not going to be able to do a lot of these other things that come on with having a fruitful life, in my opinion. And you just got to be committed, because unbelievable things can happen. Even if you have no legs, or both your legs are destroyed from joints, bad joint bleeds, whatever. That doesn't mean anything. Your mind is a beautiful thing, and your attitude. You can. I know a guy in a wheelchair in Colorado has hemophilia. He's always been in a wheelchair. I love being around this guy. He's so motivating. Been in Olympics with basketball, all kinds of things. And I think you know him, Jonathan. And that guy has it a lot worse off than me. And I guarantee he does prophylaxis because his limited deal has nothing to do with hemophilia while he's in a wheelchair. But you meet guys like that. So yes, you need to make your mind, ironclad in the prophylaxis. And I promise you, there'll be many other things that'll happen that you'll be darn glad you did it.
It's so good. Well, we're going to be talking about this and a lot more at our upcoming Prophy Conference that's coming up just right around the corner, March 10th, 11th, and 12th. And I know, Andy, people can meet you and hang out with you in our exhibit hall times because I know you'll be there. But make certain that you take time to come out and ask Andy some of these questions that you might have about your situation, because I do think that these are some key points that are really good, whether it's that you're a parent or whether it's that you're an adult living with hemophilia. These are things that we all wrestle with. And people like Andy, man, you just have so many years of experience, but also just such a positive outlook on things that really have helped you to be not only successful in your career, but also successful in your personal life too. And so, Andy, thank you so much for joining me for this podcast today and being a part of this event, Prophy Conference. And I'm really excited to be able to see you there. And we'll talk to you very soon. Well, thanks so much for tuning in today. It has been a real treat to be able to interview Andy and to be able to talk about all the different things that we have going on. Look, I am excited about this conference coming up. There's so many good things happening, and I want you to be there. So if you haven't registered yet, make sure that you go to the website at hope-charities.org and you go ahead and click right there on the Prophy Conference ad. That'll help you to actually log in and register for the event. We're giving away all kinds of prizes. We've got gift cards in every breakout session. So if you can only come to one session, that's okay. that will be a great time for you to be able to get an opportunity to win something fun and learn some amazing information and hopefully build a relationship with others. You can also join in a couple of sessions. Let's say you come for the whole event, or you want to come for 2 or 3 sessions a day. You'll be entered into a chance to win a grand prize each and every day. You'll have the choice to choose from 3 amazing things, and you can learn more about all that on our website. So make sure you check that out and register today, and that'll give you an opportunity to jump in the conversation, be a part of this with us, talk to more folks like me and Andy, and learn more about how to stay consistent and encouraged while you're doing so. So thanks so much for joining me today, and we look forward to seeing you